Hey, all right. This week we've got a lecture, we've got a lab, review quiz, and then a test coming up. So let's go through that real quick. Chapter 5 is on the cell membranes, and we'll talk a little bit about the cell membranes. I know we mentioned them back in Chapter 4 last week. We're going to talk a little bit about their structure and like what they're made up of and what they do. But then about halfway through, we're going to shift and we're going to start talking about how things go in and out of your cell. So we're going to discuss things like diffusion and osmosis, and then some other ways that things can go in and out. They're not hard, but they're a little bit more detailed than some of the stuff that we've talked about so far. So when we get to diffusion, and especially when we get to osmosis, we're going to talk about different solutions that make things go in the cell or out of the cell. Pay attention to that. Take notes. Have a scrap sheet of paper with you when you watch that lecture. And if there's something that doesn't make sense to you or you're having trouble with, feel free to write down some questions and then send me your questions when you're done, and I'll try to help you out however I can. It's really not that bad, and if you get it, it's one of those things to me where maybe the first few times you hear it, it's still a little confusing. And the more you stick with it, the more you study, and you can always rewatch that section if you want to. It kind of clicks at that point. All right, so don't give up on it if it's frustrating at first. Just make sure you give yourself enough time to study and prepare for that. And I would pay attention because that's going to go along with the lab that we've got this week too. All right. So Chapter 5, lecture videos, watch those. You have a review quiz, which is due on Sunday. And then your lab this week is also on the cell membrane and diffusion and osmosis and things like that. All right. This one's a little more detailed. You've got one lab. It's not hard. It's actually a pretty straightforward lab, but you've got one section where you are going to have to take potatoes and you're going to cut them up into like small cubes. It gives you the dimensions and all that. And you're going to let them soak overnight in different solutions. So some is going to be plain water. Some of them is going to be water with some solute, some dissolved substances in there. And we're going to create all these different solutions. Water is going to go into the potato in some of the solutions. Water is going to go out of the potato in the other solutions. So that's going to be dealing with osmosis is what we're talking about there, all right? The only thing is that that step takes a 24-hour incubation period. Now, you don't have to do the lab, like all the lab at once, but what I want you to do is read through the instructions, especially find the place where it talks about cutting your potatoes and soaking them in the solution. And then just whenever you're planning to do your lab, let's say you want to do your lab on Saturday, that's fine. Just make sure on Sunday that you cut your potatoes up and soak them in the solution so they'll be ready for you when you do the lab. Does that make sense? All right. I'm just saying, don't wait until the last second. Don't like the Sunday night open the lab for your first time and realize, oh yeah, I forgot I've got to do that. Because if you got to wait 24 hours, it's not going to be ready before the due date at that point. All right. So go through and read all the material that you need. You need ice. It's just you need, we're going to have different temperatures of water for one of these labs, and we're going to see how that can affect diffusion. So ice, a lot of this stuff you probably have, plate, coffee cup, or mug. I know we used distilled water earlier, so you should have some of that left over. Dish soap, knife. Potato is the one thing that you may not have laying around. So you've got until October 4th is when this is due. So try to plan it out with like your next grocery trip and just pick up an extra potato because you'll need to cut that up. And then other than that, like I said, pretty straightforward. Plastic wrap, if you don't have that, and get just a cheap, off-brand version of that. Plastic bag, Sharpie, spoon, scissors, sugar. You'll need a little bit of sugar too to make those different solutions to soak your potatoes in. All right. So that's it for this week. Now, just a reminder, exam 2 is coming up next week. That's going to be on chapters 3, 4, and 5. So the organic chemistry, that chapter, there's a lot of information in there, and it's been a few weeks since we've covered that. So go back and start reviewing that. Make sure that you look over that again before the test. Chapter 4 was on the cell, and then Chapter 5 is on the cell membrane this week. All right? So that'll be next Monday and Tuesday, October 5th and 6th. If you have any questions, if you need any help, let me know. Thanks.